Did you enjoy the mansion I gave you last year? My 27th birthday dinner was supposed to be simple. Just my parents, my grandfather, and me, sitting at the family's rosewood table, the one we only used for special occasions. It was a June evening, in Lenox, with that fine mist that rolls down from the Berkshires and cloaks the old historic homes. Mom had made pot roast, my favorite dish since childhood, and Grandpa Samuel had brought a special bottle of aged bourbon from his small-time distillery in Kentucky. The atmosphere was light. Dad was telling his usual stories from the law firm, while Mom smiled, shaking her head the way she always did when he exaggerated the details. I hadn't seen Grandpa Samuel this lively in months, not since the arthritis had started taking its toll on his knees. He seemed younger that night, his brown eyes sparkling with an intensity I knew well from stories told by the bonfire at the farm. It was then, with my fork suspended in midair, a piece of carrot still stuck to it, that Grandpa Samuel asked me something that froze time. "Did you enjoy the mansion I gave you last year?" he said with a mischievous glint in his eye, as if delivering the punchline to an elaborate joke. My smile vanished instantly. "What mansion?" I asked, blinking in disbelief. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. I never received anything like that. A tense silence swept through the dining room. The only sound was the slow clink of my mother's fork falling onto her antique china plate. Even the wind, rustling through the half-open window, seemed to have stopped. I turned my head to my parents, expecting to find the same confusion I felt, but what I saw was panic. My father's face, always so composed during his courtroom hearings, had gone pale. His eyes darted between Grandpa and me like a cornered animal. Mom swallowed hard, her lips pressed into a thin line, her trembling hands reaching for her wine glass. Grandpa Samuel just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over a chest, still strong for an 85-year-old man. There was a strange serenity on his face, weathered by time and the mountain sun. "Interesting," he murmured, his eyes never leaving theirs. "What are you talking about, Dad?" My mother finally managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. "You must be getting confused again." "Confused?" Grandpa let out a dry laugh that cut the air like a knife. "I'm 85, Catherine, not senile. The papers were signed at Mr. Mendes's office in Stockbridge. I transferred the old family estate to my only grandson, just as my father did for me." My father stood up abruptly, spilling a little wine on his white shirt. "Samuel, I think it's getting late for you. Come on, I'll call a cab to take you home." "I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's happening here," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "What mansion is this? What are you all talking about?" Grandpa Samuel looked directly at me, the same expression he wore when he taught me to ride a horse at 7, half challenge, half wisdom. "The House of the Golden Oaks, Ethan, our family's property for 6 generations, in the mountains of western Massachusetts. I signed the transfer on your birthday last year. Didn't you get my letter, the documents?" I shook my head slowly, feeling as if the floor were disappearing from under my feet. I never received any of that. My grandfather then did something he hadn't done in a long time. He slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "Then someone intercepted it," he said, looking directly at my father. "Someone decided they knew better than me about my own heritage." The silence that followed was like the air before a summer storm in the mountains, dense, electric, charged, with dangerous promises. My mother was now crying silently, small tears running down the face I had always associated with smiles and lullabies. "We did what was best for Ethan," my father finally said, each word sounding as if it were being torn from him. "You know what happens with that house. What happened to you? What happened to your father?" "It wasn't your decision to make," Grandpa replied, his voice now dangerously calm. "The house chooses its guardian. It always has." "What are you talking about?" I asked, looking between the three of them. "What is this about a house that chooses?" No one answered immediately. It was my grandfather who finally broke the silence. "Ethan," he said, leaning forward, There are things about our family you need to know. Things your parents have tried to hide from you. The House of the Golden Oaks isn't just a property. It's the center of something bigger. Something that has run in our blood for generations. "Enough, Dad," my mother exclaimed, the tears now replaced by a rage I rarely saw. "You promised to leave that behind when you married my mother. You promised. This madness would end with you." "And that was a mistake, Catherine," he answered, his voice heavy with an ancient sorrow. "I tried to run from the legacy, and look what happened. Your mother dead before 50. Me, plagued by nightmares for decades. The house always collects its price when we deny its call." My father stood up again, this time with a frightening determination. "Ethan will not get involved in this. We destroyed the documents. The transfer was never officially filed." The expression on my grandfather's face changed then in a way I will never forget. The kind old man who had taught me to fish and told me stories transformed into something older, more powerful. "Do you really think papers are what matter, Edward? The house is already chosen, since the day Ethan was born during that summer storm when the oaks turned golden out of season. The house recognized him. And now that he knows, well, you can't hide the truth from him anymore." And it was in that moment that everything began to unravel. The birthday dinner that was supposed to be simple had turned into the prelude to something that would change my life forever. As I watched the silent clash between my father and my grandfather, I felt as if invisible strings were pulling me toward a destiny that had been waiting for me for 27 years, hidden in the mountains of Massachusetts, among ancient oaks and even older secrets. And the documents I wasn't supposed to see. The next morning, I woke to the sun filtering through the blinds and a bitter taste in my mouth. The night before felt like a distant dream, but the heavy silence that had settled over the house confirmed it had all been real. A mansion? An entire estate gifted to me, and no one had said a word? As I listened to my parents in the kitchen, talking in tense whispers as if I were a child who couldn't hear adult discussions, I knew they were hiding something much deeper. Breakfast was an exercise in deception. Mom served buttermilk biscuits as if it were a normal Sunday, talking about the weather forecast and the new primetime drama. Dad read his newspaper, hidden behind the business section, occasionally glancing at his watch. Grandpa Samuel had left early, calling a taxi before I even woke up. The elephant in the room was so large we could barely breathe around it. "Is Grandpa okay?" I asked, breaking the charade. "Your grandfather is getting old, son," my father replied without looking up from the paper. "Sometimes he confuses things." "He didn't seem confused," I insisted, gripping my coffee mug tightly. "He seemed to be the only one telling the truth." My parents exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication developed over decades of marriage. "Ethan," my mother began, placing her hand on mine, "there are things about your grandfather's family that are complicated. The House of the Golden Oaks has stories, superstitions. Your grandfather has always taken that very seriously." "What kind of stories?" "Nonsense," my father interrupted, folding the newspaper with excessive force. "Local legends. Your grandfather grew up with it and never fully let it go." The conversation died there. Shortly after, they announced they had to leave to run some errands. Dad had a meeting at the courthouse and Mom needed to visit Aunt Carmen, who was sick. I was left alone with my questions and a silence that screamed secrets. That's when I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I searched the house. My father's study had always been forbidden territory. Even as a child, I knew that room at the end of the hall with its dark, always closed wooden door held the adult secrets I wasn't supposed to know. A respected lawyer in Lenox, Edward Thorne, kept his professional and personal life in hermetically sealed compartments. But not today. The lock yielded easily to the spare key Mom kept in a kitchen drawer. The study was as immaculate as ever. Shelves of law books organized by subject, the mahogany desk gleaming in the light from the window, the smell of leather and old paper. I started with the most obvious files, the desk drawers, the metal cabinets, even behind the framed pictures on the wall. Nothing. That's when I noticed the floor. One of the wooden floorboards under the Persian rug was slightly misaligned. I knelt, pulled back the rug, and with some effort, lifted the board. There, in a small, makeshift compartment, I found it. A thick folder with my name written on the side. My heart raced. With trembling hands, I opened the folder and confirmed my suspicions. Property documents dated exactly 1 year ago. A deed, transfer papers. The mansion was real and registered in my name. There were also receipts for tax and maintenance payments, all made by my father using an account I didn't know existed. Among the papers, I found photos. The House of the Golden Oaks was magnificent, a 19th century colonial building with thick stone walls, tall windows, and a porch that wrapped around the entire first floor. It sat atop a hill, surrounded by a garden where immense golden oak trees stood out. In the background, mountains covered by the Appalachian forest framed the property like silent guardians. But what really took my breath away was a letter. Handwritten, in my grandfather's slanted, firm script, dated on my birthday from the previous year. My dear Ethan, upon receiving this letter, you will also be receiving our family's most important legacy. The House of the Golden Oaks is not just a property, it is the heart of who we are, the center of what we have been called to protect for over 200 years. When I turned 27, my father handed me the keys just as his father did for him. It is a tradition that dates back to 1823, when our ancestor Jonathan Thorne received these lands as payment for services rendered during the war. But what he found there was much older than any nation. The house chooses its guardian, Ethan, and it chose you the moment you were born, during that unusual storm, when the oaks turned golden out of season. The signs were there, as clear as day. A responsibility comes with these stone walls, a knowledge that must be preserved, an order that must be maintained. You will find the book in the library behind the founder's portrait. There lie all the answers you will seek. I know your parents have tried to protect you from this destiny. They fear what they do not understand. They tried to convince me to sell the property years ago to leave the past behind. But some things cannot be abandoned without consequences. You are the last of the line, my grandson. The last who can restore what has been lost. When you are ready, the house will call to you. And when you get there, you will know why. With love and hope for the future of our legacy, your grandfather, Samuel. I read the letter 3 times, trying to process every word. What was this legacy? What knowledge needed to be preserved, and why had my parents hidden this from me? I continued to rummage and found something even more disturbing, a yellowed newspaper clipping. It was from the Berkshire Gazette, dated 1973. The headline read, "Tragedy at Golden Oaks, owner found dead in mysterious circumstances." The man in the photo was my great-grandfather, Anthony Thorne, Grandpa Samuel's father. According to the report, he had been found in the house's cellar, surrounded by strange symbols drawn on the floor. The authorities ruled it a suicide, but there were rumors among the locals about ancient rituals and unfulfilled duties. The paper mentioned that Samuel Thorne, then 33, had taken over the property and vehemently denied any supernatural element in the case. I photographed all the documents with my phone, put everything back exactly as I had found it, and closed the secret compartment. I had barely adjusted the rug when I heard the sound of the front door opening. In seconds, I was out of the study, locking the door behind me. "Ethan?" My mother's voice echoed through the house. "We're home." I forced a smile as I walked into the living room. I found her putting away groceries, no sign that she had visited Aunt Carmen. Another lie. "Everything okay, Mom?" I asked, watching her hands tremble slightly as she put cans in the pantry. "Of course, son," she replied, sweet and casual, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't stolen a house from me, as if she wasn't hiding secrets that, apparently, could cost lives. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I made my decision. I needed to see the House of the Golden Oaks with my own eyes. I needed to understand why a simple family property caused so much fear in my parents and so much reverence in my grandfather. I needed to discover what this legacy was that was now supposedly mine. The next morning, I would leave for the Berkshires without telling anyone, with only my grandfather's letter and an address that, according to all official documents, had already belonged to me for a whole year. The key still worked. I left before dawn, leaving only a vague note about visiting a friend in Albany. The sky was still dark when I put my backpack in the trunk of the 2010 Honda Civic I had bought with my savings as a history teacher. Ironic how I was now in search of my own history, buried among family secrets. The road to western Massachusetts was winding and beautiful, cutting through the Berkshire Mountains with curves that snaked between walls of dense forest. As the sun rose, dyeing the sky orange and pink, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and peace. It was as if I were finally following a path that had always been laid out for me, even without my knowing. I stopped in Pittsfield for coffee and to check the directions. According to the GPS, I still had about 50 miles to the town, and from there, I would have to take a secondary road for another 15 miles to the property. While I waited for my coffee, I reread my grandfather's letter. The house chooses its guardian. What did that mean? What kind of responsibility had scared my parents so much? The rest of the trip was a gradual descent into a different world. The roads narrowed, pavement gave way to red dirt tracks, and signs became scarce. Landscapes of pastures and farms alternated with stretches of dense forest, until I began to climb a mountain range covered in a fine mist that danced among the ancient trees. That's when I saw the first golden oak. Majestic, its branches spread, like open arms completely covered in golden leaves out of season. Normally the oaks turned in autumn, but we were in June. It was impossible. Further on, another oak, equally covered in golden leaves, and another. The higher I climbed, the more golden oaks I found, forming a kind of golden path along the dirt road. At the top of the mountain, the road took a sharp turn, and it was there that I saw it for the first time. The House of the Golden Oaks emerged, like an apparition from another century, its dark stone walls contrasting with the autumn blue sky. Larger and more imposing than in the photos, the colonial mansion stood at the highest point of the land, surrounded by a garden where dozens of golden oaks created a golden spectacle that seemed unreal. I stopped the car at the beginning of the access road and just stood there contemplating the view. The property was protected by a low stone wall and a wrought iron gate. As I watched, something extraordinary happened. The gate began to open slowly without anyone touching it. There was no electric motor, no visible mechanism. It was as if the house itself were inviting me in. With my heart racing, I drove slowly down the avenue of oaks that led to the mansion. I parked in front of the stone staircase that led to the porch. The silence was absolute, except for the occasional song of a bird and the whisper of leaves in the wind. I got out of the car and walked up the steps, feeling each step as if in a dream. In the letter, my grandfather had mentioned a key, but I hadn't received one. Still, something compelled me to check my pockets. To my surprise, I found an old bronze key that certainly hadn't been there before. It was heavy with intricate carvings and the design of an oak leaf on the head. The main door was a masterpiece of dark wood, with carved details of intertwined leaves and branches. The key fit perfectly into the lock, turning effortlessly. With a soft click, the door opened to a world that seemed to have been waiting for me for decades. The interior of the mansion smelled of time and silence. It wasn't the smell of abandonment or mold I expected, but something more complex. Polished wood, old books, perhaps a trace of incense. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air like tiny stars. I entered a wide entrance hall with wide plank floors that creaked softly under my feet. A crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, and a curved dark wood staircase led to the second floor. On the walls, oil portraits of men and women in period dress watched me with eyes that seemed to follow my movements. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. No answer except the distant ticking of a clock. The house was not abandoned. Someone had been maintaining it. The furniture, velvet chairs, carved wooden tables, marble-topped sideboards, was free of dust. The damask curtains seemed to have been recently changed. It was as if someone were living there, or waiting. I walked through the first floor, exploring each room. The living room with its stone fireplace. The dining room dominated by a rosewood table that could seat 20 people. A music room with a Bechstein grand piano. A library that made my history teacher's heart race. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, some looking centuries old. It was in the library that I found the portrait mentioned in the letter. Unlike the others, this one hung alone on the main wall. A middle-aged man with a graying beard and penetrating eyes wearing a Revolutionary War military uniform. A golden plaque on the base of the frame identified him as Jonathan Thorne, 1755-1830, founder and first guardian. With trembling hands, I touched the edge of the portrait. As my grandfather had said, it was attached to a hidden mechanism. When I pulled lightly, the frame moved away from the wall, revealing a niche where a large ancient book rested. Bound in black leather with silver details, the book was heavy, its pages yellowed with time. On the cover, engraved in silver, was the same symbol I had seen on the gate, a stylized oak, its roots digging deep into the earth, its branches forming a pattern reminiscent of astrological symbols. I took the book to a nearby table by the window and opened it carefully. The first pages were written in archaic English, dated 1823. I, Jonathan Thorne, having received these lands for services, rendered to the new republic, hereby record the true nature of what I have found. It was no mere chance that brought me to this place. The natives called it land where the sky touches the earth, and had avoided it for generations. Now I understand why. What lies beneath this house is older than our understanding, a power that flows from the bowels of the earth and connects to the stars above. The Order of the Golden Oak has existed in secret for centuries, guardian of the knowledge that the Puritans tried to destroy, that the explorers sought in vain. Today I am the last living member. With the construction of this house over the point of convergence, I assume the duty to protect this knowledge and prepare the way for those who will come after. Let he who reads these words understand. To be the guardian is not a choice, but a call of the blood. The house will recognize its true heir, even if generations pass. The signs cannot be ignored. The flowering out of season, the call in dreams, the knowledge that comes without being taught. The following pages contained complex diagrams, mathematical formulas I didn't understand, celestial maps and notes on lunar cycles. There were detailed records of rituals performed on specific dates, always related to the positions of the stars and the blooming of the oaks. In another section, I found the history of the Order of the Golden Oak, apparently a secret fraternity, formed by Native American scholars, dissident European philosophers, and naturalists. According to the text, they had discovered unique properties in the soil of this region, a kind of confluence of telluric energies that affected perception and expanded consciousness. The rituals described seemed to combine elements from different traditions, creating a unique system of knowledge that transcended religions and cultures. The most disturbing section was titled The Price of Guardianship. There, Jonathan Thorne described how each guardian paid a price for the knowledge and power they received. Prophetic dreams that became increasingly vivid and unsettling, perceptions that went beyond the five senses, and eventually a connection so deep with the property that it became impossible to leave it for long periods without falling ill. The notes of subsequent guardians confirmed these effects. My great-great-grandfather wrote about how he could feel the pain of the trees when they were cut. My great-grandfather recorded how he began to see the threads that connect all things. And then abruptly, his notes ended, followed by a single entry from my grandfather, Samuel. August 13th, 1973. My father is dead. I found him in the stone circle, where he performed the ritual of transfer alone. There was no need for it. I would have accepted the duty. Why did he do it? The symbols on the ground? The blood? The police are calling it a suicide. I cannot tell the truth. As of today, the rituals will cease. I will try to live as a normal man, far from this curse. May God forgive me if I am making a mistake, but I cannot continue this legacy. The Order of the Golden Oak ends with me. There were no more entries after that, just blank pages waiting to be filled. I closed the book, my mind reeling with all the information. Was it madness? Delusion? Or was there something real behind it all? At that moment, I felt something change in the air. A weight, a presence. I looked out the window and noticed the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky red and gold. The shadows inside the library lengthened, and for a moment, I had the distinct impression that I was not alone. I took the book and left the library, determined to explore the rest of the house before it got completely dark. On the second floor, I found bedrooms prepared as if awaiting guests. Beds made, clean towels, even clothes in the closets that strangely seemed to be my size. The master bedroom, obviously intended for the owner of the house, was spacious and dominated by a four-poster bed. On the bedside table, I found a framed photo. My grandfather, young, next to my grandmother, whom I had barely known, both smiling in front of the house. The date on the back, 1968, 5 years before my great-grandfather's death. It was in the cellar that I found something much older than wine, a sealed room marked with the family crest. The massive wooden door was locked, but the same key that had opened the front door fit perfectly. Inside, I discovered what appeared to be a ritual chamber, a circle of stones embedded in the dirt floor, symbols carved on the walls, niches containing candles, dried herbs, crystals, and other ritual objects. In the center of the circle was a larger, flatter stone, almost an altar, with the symbol of the oak deeply engraved. As I approached, I felt a subtle vibration, like the distant hum of bees. I touched the stone, and a strange sensation ran through my body, not unpleasant but intense, like a very weak electric current. Everything pointed to some kind of ancient order. My family had been guardians of a secret fraternity, and this mansion was its headquarters. Grandpa Samuel had passed it on to me, hoping I would restore what was lost. I felt something awaken within me. A calling. It wasn't fear, it was clarity. This was no longer about my parents or a hidden property, it was about purpose. I wasn't just the heir to a building, I was the heir to a lineage that had lain dormant for too long. When I finally left the cellar, night had completely fallen. I decided to spend the night in the mansion, in the master bedroom that, apparently, was now mine. Lying in the antique bed, I watched the full moon's light stream through the windows, illuminating the room with a silver glow. Outside, the oaks seemed to shine in the darkness, their golden leaves reflecting the moonlight. I fell asleep thinking of my grandfather's words, "The house chooses its guardian." And as I drifted into sleep, I was certain that in some inexplicable way, the House of the Golden Oaks had chosen me long before I knew of its existence. Untruth has a price. I spent 3 days at the House of the Golden Oaks, each moment a discovery. During the day, I explored the most remote corners of the property, the abandoned orchard where century-old apple trees still bore fruit, the small lake surrounded by willows, the ruins of a chapel in the farthest part of the land. At night, I pored over the Order's book, absorbing its contents like a thirsty man. I learned about the cycles of the oak's golden leaves and their connection to specific celestial movements. I discovered accounts of extraordinary experiences lived by previous guardians, visions of the future, communication with nature, perception of energies that ordinary eyes could not see. Some nights I dreamed of men and women dressed in golden robes, gathered in a circle under the golden oaks, chanting in a language I had never heard but strangely understood. On the third day, I found a wooden box hidden under the floorboards of the master bedroom. Inside, a set of old keys and a silver medallion with the oak symbol. When I put it around my neck, I felt a warmth spread through my body, as if something dormant had awakened. It was that night that I made my decision. It was time to confront my parents. I returned to Lenox in the late afternoon. The sky was heavy, heralding a storm that seemed to mirror the turmoil within me. I parked in front of the house where I grew up, feeling strangely like a visitor. The silver medallion was a heavy weight against my chest, hidden under my shirt. I found them in the living room, tense and pale. My friend from Albany had obviously not convinced anyone. My mother ran to hug me, her eyes red from crying. "Ethan, where were you? We were so worried." "You know exactly where I was," I replied, keeping my voice calm as I placed my backpack on the floor. At the house of the Golden Oaks. My father shot up from the sofa, his face a mask of shock and anger. Who took you there?" In response, I took the documents out of my pocket, the copies I had made before leaving. I spread them on the coffee table. The deed, the photos, my grandfather's letter, irrefutable proof of what they had hidden from me. No one took me. I went on my own to see what is mine by right. The silence that followed was as thick as fog. My mother covered her face with her hands, while my father seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa. "I want answers, all of them." For the first time in my life, I saw my father obey without question. They sat side by side, like defendants before a judge. I felt a strange role reversal. The son now in charge, the parents cornered by the truth. "Why did you hide the mansion from me?" I began, my voice firmer than it had ever been when speaking to them. My mother was the one who answered, her voice almost a whisper. "To protect you, son. It was always to protect you." "Protect me from what? An inheritance, a house?" "From a curse," my father interrupted, his eyes meeting mine. "That house, that order, it destroyed his family for generations. You don't know what your grandfather was like before he tried to abandon all that. An obsessed man, consumed by rituals and visions that pushed him away from reality." "I've read the book," I replied, watching as the mention made my father pale. "I know about the Order of the Golden Oak, about the Guardians, about the knowledge they protect." "Knowledge?" My father gave a bitter laugh. "Is that what you think?" "It is? Superstitions, pagan rituals mixed with cheap mysticism. Your grandfather almost went mad because of it. After your great-grandfather died in those circumstances, Samuel swore to abandon it all. It was the condition I set for him to marry your mother." I looked at my mother, surprised. "You're part of this too?" She shook her head. "Not of the order, but my family always knew about them. My ancestors were servants at the House of the Golden Oaks for generations. When I fell in love with your father, he made me swear we would leave that in the past, that our children would never know. And when Grandpa decided to give me the house, it was a betrayal," my father completed, his voice hard. "He had promised. We swore that madness would end with him, that you would have a normal life. When we found out he had transferred the property to you on your 26th birthday, we intercepted the documents. It was for your own good." "It wasn't your decision to make," I replied, the same words my grandfather had used on the night of the revelation. "You stole from me, not just a house, but my heritage, my history. You decided who I should be without giving me a choice." "We are your parents," my father exploded, standing up. "It's our duty to protect you, even from choices you don't understand. You have no idea what that place does to people. The price each guardian pays." "I know more than you imagine," I replied, remaining calm. Instinctively, I touched the medallion under my shirt. "I've dreamed of them, Dad, of all the guardians who came before. They showed me things I can't explain. The house, it recognized me. The oaks turned golden when I arrived out of season." My mother sobbed softly. "It's already started," she murmured, "just like with your grandfather." "Son," my father tried a softer approach, sitting down again. "Those dreams, those coincidences, there are rational explanations. The human mind seeks patterns where none exist. The oaks might change color out of season due to climate shifts. Don't let ancient superstitions destroy your future. What future? I asked, feeling a rising anger. One that you planned based on lies, where I would never know who I really am, where I come from. Ethan, my mother pleaded, your father only wanted what was best for you. We both did. You didn't see what that house did to your grandfather. The nightmares, the obsessions. For years he barely slept, waking up screaming about responsibilities and duties, about terrible consequences if the order didn't continue its work. And what happened when he tried to abandon it all? I asked, though I already knew the answer from the book. My parents exchanged dark glances. Your grandmother died, my father finally said. An inexplicable accident. Then came the illnesses. Samuel suffered for years with ailments no doctor could diagnose. Only when he started visiting the house regularly again, maintaining the minimal rituals, did things improve. Don't you see? It's not something you can just abandon. It's part of him, it's part of me. It's coincidence, my father insisted, his voice rising. Paranoia fueled by backward traditions. You're an educated man, a teacher for God's sake. How can you believe this stuff? I stood up, feeling a strange serenity wash over me. Because I've felt it, because I've seen it, and because for the first time in 27 years, something inside me makes sense. I walked to the window watching the storm that was beginning outside. Lightning cut across the sky, momentarily illuminating the garden. I'm going to take over the House of the Golden Oaks, I announced, turning to face them. I'm going to restore the order as Grandpa wished. I don't expect you to understand or support it, but I expect you to respect my decision. You don't know what you're saying. My father stood up, his face contorted with desperation. That thing will consume you just like it almost consumed your grandfather. Please, son, forget this madness. Sell the property. Use the money to travel, see the world. Start a new life, far from these superstitions. And the documents you forged? I asked, my calm voice contrasting with his agitation. The deed you kept hidden? The taxes you paid in my name without my knowledge? My mother sobbed louder while my father paled. That's a crime, Dad. As a lawyer, you know that, better than anyone. Are you threatening us? He asked, incredulous. I'm pointing out facts. You betrayed me, you lied, you stole what was mine by right, and you still have the audacity to say it was for love. I grabbed my backpack, slinging it over my shoulder. I hadn't planned to leave that night, but now I knew I could no longer stay under the same roof as them. I'm going back to the House of the Golden Oaks tonight, I announced. That's where I belong now. Ethan, it's storming, my mother begged. Stay until morning at least. I shook my head. Every day I spent away from that house was a day stolen from me. I won't lose any more. My father took a step toward me, his face a mask of pain and anger. If you walk out that door now, if you choose that damned house and its superstitions over your family, I don't know if I can forgive that. I looked into the eyes of the man who had raised me, who had taught me about honesty and integrity, and I felt a deep sadness for the chasm that now opened between us. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Dad. I'm asking you to respect who I am, who I've always been, even without knowing it. And with those words, I walked to the door, ignoring my mother's sobs and my father's heavy silence. For the first time in my life, I felt I no longer belonged to them. I belonged to something older, something that called to me across generations. The storm welcomed me like an old friend as I stepped out into the night. The lightning illuminated my path as I drove back to the Berkshires, to the House of the Golden Oaks, to the destiny that had waited for me all these years. And the mansion was not empty. I arrived at the House of the Golden Oaks just before dawn, exhausted from the night drive through the storm that seemed to chase my car along the winding roads. As I parked in front of the mansion, the rain stopped abruptly, as if it had fulfilled its purpose of bringing me back. The sky began to lighten on the horizon, a pink-orange band heralding a new day. This time, upon entering the house, something was different. The air vibrated with a subtle energy, like the distant hum of a swarm. The shadows seemed deeper, the outlines of objects sharper. Or perhaps it was just my perception that had changed after the confrontation with my parents, after accepting who I really was. I went straight up to the master bedroom, dropped my backpack on the floor, and collapsed onto the antique bed, still, fully clothed. I dreamed intensely, not the fragmented sleep of the exhausted, but something vivid and controlled. I saw myself walking through a labyrinth of golden oaks, following a hooded figure carrying a torch. When I finally reached it, the figure turned. It was my grandfather, younger than I had ever known him, his eyes shining with an inner fire. "It is time," he said in the dream, his voice resonating as if from everywhere at once. "The solstice approaches. The circle must be remade." I woke at noon with those words echoing in my mind and an inexplicable certainty of what I needed to do. I washed, changed, and went down to the library. I spent the rest of the day studying the Order's book, focusing on the passages about the Guardian's initiation ritual. According to the writings, the winter solstice, which would occur in exactly 4 days, was the ideal time for a new Guardian to formally assume their duties. The ritual required preparation. I would need certain herbs, specific crystals, and, most importantly, I needed to find the original stone circle mentioned in several passages. According to the book, this circle had been built by the indigenous peoples who originally recognized the power of the place long before the arrival of Europeans. The next morning, I began to explore the property systematically. The house of the Golden Oaks was situated on a property of nearly 100 acres, much of it covered by native forest. Following the directions in the book, I walked north, where a rock formation rose like a natural sentinel. After 2 hours of walking along nearly invisible trails, I found it, a perfect circle of 12 vertical stones, each about 5 feet high, partially covered in moss and vines. In the center, a flat circular stone with complex carvings that corresponded exactly to the drawings in the book. I knelt in the center of the circle, touching the ancient symbols with my fingertips. A tingling sensation ran up my arms, and for a moment, I had the impression that the entire forest had fallen silent, as if holding its breath. When I finally stood up, I noticed something extraordinary. A small oak tree was growing between 2 of the vertical stones. It was golden, its leaves shining brightly under the sun filtered by the canopies of the taller trees. I spent the rest of that day clearing the circle, carefully removing the vegetation that covered it, restoring it to what it must have been originally. As I worked, I felt watched, not in a threatening way, but as if invisible ancestors were following my every move, silently approving of my efforts. On the morning of the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. I was in the library comparing some of the symbols I had found in the circle with those described in the book, when I heard the distinct sound of footsteps in the entrance hall, not furtive steps, but firm and deliberate. I froze. I was alone in the house, or so I believed. I grabbed a silver letter opener from the table, the only thing nearby that could serve as a weapon, and walked silently to the library door. The footsteps were getting closer. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway, ready to confront the intruder. It was an old man, as thin as a dry twig, with white hair that fell to his shoulders and an equally white beard. He wore simple clothes, cotton trousers, a long-sleeved white shirt, and a vest embroidered, with motifs I recognized immediately, small golden oaks. His eyes, however, were what was most striking, a blue so light it seemed almost transparent, contrasting with his sun-tanned skin. "You've finally arrived," he said, his voice hoarse, but firm. Old Samuel was right. The house chose well. I lowered the letter opener, feeling ridiculous for having brandished it. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" The man smiled, revealing surprisingly perfect teeth for someone his age. "My name is Jacob Silver. I have served the House of the Golden Oaks and the Order for over 60 years. As for how I got in," he made a vague gesture with his hand, "I have my own keys. I am the caretaker, so to speak. The caretaker, I repeated, beginning to understand. You're the one who's maintained the house all these years? Someone had to, while your grandfather fought his destiny and your family hid the truth from you. He studied me from head to toe, like a master assessing an apprentice. You look like him, you know, like Samuel when he was young. Before the weight of knowledge and denial bent him, I invited Jacob into the living room where he politely declined the coffee I offered, preferring an herbal infusion. He prepared himself in the kitchen with leaves he carried in a small leather pouch. It's ironwood tea, he explained, offering me a cup. It clears the mind and strengthens the spirit. We'll need both in the coming days. As we drank, Jacob told me his story. Born into a family that had served the House of the Golden Oaks for generations, he had been chosen as a boy to be initiated into the lesser mysteries of the Order. He was not a guardian. That role was reserved only for the direct descendants of the founder, but a guardian of the guardian, a protector of the rituals and traditions. When your grandfather decided to abandon everything after the death of your great-grandfather, it was I who kept the flame alive, he explained. I performed the minimal ritual so that the property would not completely lose its connection to what lies beyond the veil. But it's not the same. The Order needs a true guardian. What happened to my great-grandfather? I asked, the question that had tormented me since I read the newspaper clipping. Was it really suicide? Jacob looked at his cup for a long moment before answering. Anthony Thorne was a powerful guardian, perhaps too powerful. He delved into aspects of the Order that many considered dangerous. He tried to force the veil, instead of just observing through it. In the end, the knowledge he sought demanded a price he did not expect to pay. What knowledge? The nature of reality itself. The Order has always known that what we call the real world is just a thin layer over something much vaster and more complex. Your great-grandfather wanted to tear the veil completely, not just peer through it at specific moments, as the rituals teach. He wanted permanent access to what lies beyond. A shiver ran down my spine. And that killed him? In a way. The ritual he attempted required a sacrifice. He believed it would be symbolic. He discovered too late that it was not. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of that revelation hanging between us. Finally, I put my cup on the table and looked directly at Jacob. The solstice is in 3 days, I said. I found the stone circle and I'm restoring it. I want to complete the initiation ritual. To my surprise, Jacob smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his wrinkled face. I knew it, he said almost to himself. When the oaks turned golden out of season last week, I knew the new guardian had arrived. After all these years, the Order will live again. He stood up with surprising agility for his age. We have much work to do. The ritual requires preparation, both physical and spiritual, and you have much to learn in very little time. Chatur said. Next 3 days were a total immersion in the mysteries of the Order of the Golden Oak. Jacob proved to be a strict and patient teacher. In the morning, we studied the ancient texts, deciphering symbols and memorizing invocations in a language that mixed old Algonquin, archaic English, and something else, something Jacob called the primordial tongue. In the afternoon, we prepared the stone circle, cleaning it completely, restoring symbols worn by time, aligning each stone precisely with specific points on the horizon. Jacob explained that the circle functioned as a kind of astronomical calendar, marking solstices, equinoxes, and other significant celestial events. At night, we performed small preparatory rituals. I learned to enter altered states of consciousness through breath and movement, to perceive the subtle currents of energy that flowed through the property, to feel the presence of the previous guardians who, according to Jacob, never really left. At various times, I had doubts. Was it all real or just elaborate superstitions, as my father insisted? But then something would happen. A prophetic dream that was confirmed the next morning. The unusual behavior of the forest animals around me. The unmistakable feeling of presences watching, approving. And my doubts, would dissipate like mist under the sun. On the eve of the solstice, Jacob took me to a part of the property I had not yet explored. Beyond a small stream, hidden by a curtain of bamboo, was a simple structure, a stone cabin with a thatched roof. "My home," he explained, opening the wooden door. "I've lived here since your grandfather left the mansion." The interior was surprisingly spacious and organized. A simple bed, shelves filled with books and manuscripts, a workbench covered with astrological charts, and most intriguingly, an entire wall dedicated to photographs. I approached, recognizing my grandfather in several of them, at different ages. In one, particularly yellowed, he appeared as a young man of perhaps 20, alongside a young Jacob and several other men and women, all wearing robes with the embroidered oak symbol. "The last full members of the order," Jacob explained, sadness evident in his voice, "before your grandfather decided it was too dangerous to continue." Who were they all? Scholars, mostly. People who had shown an affinity for the knowledge the order protects. Some were from the traditional families that always supported the order: the Silvers, the Mendes, the Pereiras. Others came from outside, drawn by signs and dreams. "And they're all gone now?" Jacob sighed. "Scattered. Some have died. Others went on with their lives, trying to forget what they had learned here. Some went mad trying to practice the rituals, alone, without the protection of the circle and the guardian." He turned to me, his intense blue eyes fixed on mine. "That is why your initiation tomorrow is so important. The order needs a center again, a guardian who can begin to gather the fragments." From a low cabinet, Jacob retrieved a cloth-wrapped bundle. When he opened it, he revealed a golden robe, richly embroidered with symbols of the order and oak branches that seemed almost alive on the fabric. "This was your great-grandfather's and his father's before him. Tomorrow, it will be yours." Touched the fabric, surprisingly light and soft, feeling a current of energy run through my fingers. "Am I ready?" I asked, more to myself than to him. "No guardian is ever truly ready," Jacob replied with a gentle smile. "The knowledge is too vast, the mystery too deep. But you were chosen. The house has recognized you. The oaks bloom for you. The rest will come with time." That night I returned to the mansion with the robe carefully folded in my arms. In the master bedroom, I placed it on the bed and watched it in the candlelight. Tomorrow, on the winter solstice, I would officially become the guardian of the House of the Golden Oaks and the Order of the Golden Oak. I would restore a legacy that was almost lost to fear and misunderstanding. Through the open window, the faume, night breeze brought the scent of the golden oaks and, more distantly, the soft sound of the stream. For the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace, completely in my place. As if my entire previous existence had been just a preparation for this moment, for this destiny. I dreamed again that night, of stone circles, of golden flowers falling like rain, of ancestors with stern faces but kind eyes. And in every dream, in every vision, I felt a calling, a purpose that transcended my small individual life and connected me to something much larger and more ancient. The mansion was not empty. It never had been. It was just waiting for me. And so the chaos began. The winter solstice dawned clear and cold, the sky an intense blue that seemed almost unreal after days of constant fog. I woke before the sun, as if some internal clock had roused me at precisely the right moment. The silver medallion against my chest was warm, almost uncomfortably so, as if it had absorbed heat from my own body during the night. Jacob was already waiting for me in the garden, dressed in a robe similar to mine, though simpler. Without words, we followed the trail that led to the stone circle. The path that days before had seemed confusing and almost imperceptible now revealed itself clearly under my feet, as if the earth itself wanted to ease my journey on this special day. The initiation ritual was simultaneously simpler and more profound than I had expected. There were no elaborate incantations or dramatic manifestations, just the sun rising exactly on the central axis of the circle, its first ray touching the central stone where I knelt, and a moment of clarity so absolute it left me breathless. In that instant of perfect connection between sky and earth, past and present, I saw the Order as it truly was. Not a mystical cult or a secret society, but a living link in a chain of knowledge that stretched back in time to the first humans who looked at the stars and perceived patterns. I saw the guardians who preceded me, not as ghosts, but as real presences, an unbroken lineage of seekers. When the moment passed and I returned to normal consciousness, something had fundamentally changed in me. The world seemed sharper, more alive, the colors more intense, the sounds clearer. And there was something else, a constant perception of invisible currents of energy connecting all living things around me. "Welcome, Guardian," Jacob said formally, bowing slightly. In his blue eyes, I saw restrained tears. "The Order lives in you now." In the days that followed the initiation, I began to better understand what it meant to be the guardian of the House of the Golden Oaks. It wasn't just about rituals and ancient knowledge, it was about responsibility. The property and the surrounding area formed a nexus of natural energies that needed to be monitored and occasionally balanced through specific rituals. Jacob taught me to read the health of the land by the growth patterns of plants, the behavior of animals, the subtle changes in the air quality. I learned to perceive disturbances in the natural balance and how to correct them through small interventions. A repositioned stone here, an offering of herbs there, a whispered invocation at dawn. 2 weeks after my initiation, I received the news my grandfather, Samuel Thorne, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The message came via a phone call from my mother, her voice choked with tears. "He passed last night," she said. "The doctor said it was natural, that his heart just stopped, but before, he left a letter for you. He said it was important that you receive it immediately after he was gone." I felt a deep pain but not surprise. Somehow I knew Grandpa had waited just long enough to ensure the legacy was safe before he departed. His mission was accomplished. He had found his successor. The funeral was held in Lenox, where my grandfather had lived his final years. It was a simple ceremony, as he would have wished. Only immediate family and a few close friends were present. My parents looked older, bent by the weight of grief, and perhaps by the weight of secrets kept for too long. I was different, and they noticed. It wasn't just the formal black robe I wore under my suit jacket, or the silver medallion now visible on my chest. It was something in my eyes, in my posture, in the way I moved with a new, quiet confidence. After the ceremony, while others consoled my mother, my father pulled me to a corner of the cemetery. "You seem changed," he said, studying my face as if looking for signs of illness. "I am," I replied simply. "I'm the guardian now." He closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing a blow. "So it's done. The madness continues for another generation." "It's not madness, Dad. It's knowledge, it's purpose." "And what purpose is that? That requires you to abandon your life, your career, your family?" "I haven't abandoned anything that truly matters," I replied, feeling a calm that contrasted with his agitation. "I've found my place, just as you found yours in the law as Mom found hers in teaching. The difference is you tried to deny mine." He had no answer for that. After a moment, he handed me an envelope. "Your grandfather left this, said it was for your eyes only." The envelope was sealed with red wax stamped with the oak symbol. Inside, I found a handwritten letter and an old key I recognized immediately. It was identical to the one that had mysteriously appeared in my pocket when I first visited the House of the Golden Oaks. The letter was brief. "My dear Ethan, if you are reading this, I have completed my journey on this plane. Do not feel sadness. I departed in peace, knowing the legacy is safe in your hands." The key accompanying this letter opens the safe hidden behind the oak panel in my old study at the house. There you will find the last secrets I could not entrust to paper, the true purpose of the Order, beyond the guardianship of the land. They feared the truth. You must not. Knowledge is power only when it is complete. Always remember, the house chooses, and it chose well. With eternal love, your grandfather, Samuel. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my jacket's inner pocket, along with the key. When I looked up, my father was still watching me, a complex expression on his face. Fear, concern, perhaps even a touch of envy. "What did it say?" he asked. "That they feared the truth," I replied. "That I must not." After the funeral, I returned to the House of the Golden Oaks with a new determination. Using the key left by my grandfather, I opened the hidden safe and found a diary bound in black leather, much older than the orders book I already knew. The yellowed pages contained astonishing revelations. The Order of the Golden Oak was not just a local mystical fraternity. It was part of a global network of similar guardians, each responsible for a specific geographical nexus. These points of power, distributed across the planet, formed a complex system of energetic balance that helped maintain the stability of reality itself. The previous guardians had maintained contact with their counterparts in other countries. There were mentions of correspondence with the Guardian of the Stone Circle in England, the Protector of the Red Forest in Russia, the Master of the Sacred Mountain in Japan. It was a brotherhood that transcended borders, cultures, and even religions, united by a common purpose: the preservation of balance. In the final pages of the diary, my grandfather had written his last confession. His attempt to abandon the order had had consequences far beyond his own health. The energy nexus of the House of the Golden Oaks, without a proper guardian to maintain it, had begun to destabilize. Weather patterns in the region had shifted. Crops failed inexplicably. Mysterious diseases affected plants and animals. Only when he resumed performing the minimal rituals did the situation begin to normalize. "The network must be restored," he wrote in his last entry. "The contacts have been lost, the lines of communication broken. My grandson must find the other guardians. The balance depends on it." I closed the diary, feeling the weight of the responsibility I now carried. It wasn't just a property or a family tradition. It was part of a global system of balance that had been neglected for decades. Meanwhile, the chaos for my parents was just beginning. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a frantic phone call from my mother. The authorities had discovered the irregularities in the documents for the House of the Golden Oaks, the forged signatures, the improperly paid taxes. A disgruntled client from my father's firm, looking for ways to harm him, had discovered the fraud and reported it. My parents were called in for questioning. The respected Thorne family name appeared in the police blotter for the first time in generations. My father's law firm lost major clients. His reputation, built over decades, crumbled day by day. I could have intervened. I could have said it was all a misunderstanding, that I knew about the documents, that I had consented to the arrangement. A lie to protect them, just as they had lied to protect me. But I remained silent, not out of revenge. I had moved past the initial anger, but because I now understood that actions have consequences. That balance always restores itself, one way or another. That trying to control the destiny of others, even for love, creates imbalances that must eventually be corrected. Occasionally, I received news about them through mutual acquaintances. My father had lost his license to practice law. My mother had retired from the school where she taught, unable to face the stares and whispers. They had moved to a smaller house, selling the family home to cover legal costs. I felt sadness for their suffering, but not guilt. Part of me hoped that through this ordeal they would find a truth they had denied for so long, that some things are bigger than our small attempts at control, that some destinies cannot be avoided. 1 year after my initiation, the House of the Golden Oaks had been completely restored to its former glory. Jacob, now officially my advisor and assistant, helped me locate other former members of the order who were still alive. Some returned, drawn by the call they felt in their dreams. Others kept their distance, still fearful of the responsibilities that came with the knowledge. Most importantly, I began researching the other nexuses around the world, trying to re-establish the lost contacts between the guardians. It was slow, meticulous work, based on cryptic clues in the old diaries and on signs I was learning to interpret in the patterns of the stars, the unusual migrations of birds, the dreams that came with increasing clarity. Every morning I walked the stone corridors of the mansion with purpose. I studied the ancient books. I memorized the rituals. I practiced the techniques of expanded perception that allowed me to feel the currents of energy flowing through the property. And I prepared, because I knew, as my grandfather had written, that when the heir returns, the others will come, the other guardians scattered around the world, the other seekers of true knowledge. And when they came, I would be ready. Now, every day at dawn, I climb to the highest point of the property, where the oldest oaks form a natural circle. From there, I watch the rising sun and renew my silent commitment to the land, to the lineage, to the balance that is my responsibility to maintain. And occasionally, when the wind blows from the south and the conditions are perfect, I have the impression of hearing distant voices, the guardians of the past, perhaps, or those who will come in the future, whispering encouragement, reminding me that I am never truly alone in this ancestral vigil. The House of the Golden Oaks flourishes again, its mysteries awakened, its guardian finally in his rightful place. And as the golden leaves fall like rain in the morning breeze, I know that this is only the beginning of the true journey.